Initially, we journey to Dallas for the sentencing of Talal Shamu, an individual consistently entangled in legal troubles. Initially accused of misconduct against a girl using the alias Lindsay Cramert to safeguard her identity, Shamu possessed a troubling criminal history featuring convictions for violent offenses. Despite supposed background checks by Uber, he astonishingly secured a position as a driver for the company. Shamu had previously served a 6.5-year prison sentence for illegally possessing firearms. Furthermore, a disturbing list of allegations included shooting a juvenile, attempting to smuggle rocket launchers, assaulting his wife with a crowbar, and even plotting a hitman's hire. Remarkably, 3 years post-release, Shamu passed Uber's screening and began driving in 2015. Just 3 months into Uber, he followed a passenger home, leading to a sexual assault. Regrettably, Shamu wasn't the sole criminal evading Uber's screening. A CNN investigation exposed several felons and dangerous individuals approved as Uber drivers. On July 25, 2015, Shamu picked up a 27-year-old woman in Oak Lawn, driving her to her West Oak Cliff home. The intoxicated woman discovered the assault after regaining consciousness. Despite Shamu's apprehension, it emerged during court proceedings that he had become an Uber driver despite his criminal past, using a counterfeit Dallas City driving permit. The victim, due to intoxication, lacked memory of the assault, but firmly denied consenting to any sexual activity. Physical evidence, such as knee scrapes and a head bump, supported her claims.
I was piecing together a night of spotty memory.
The defense focused on the need for clarity, contending that the woman's intoxication raised questions about consent. The prosecution argued she was too drunk to consent, but the defense maintained that her lack of recall made it uncertain.
We are not here because of a rape. We are here because a woman messed up, she got caught, and she had to find a way out.
The jurors agreed that Shamu didn't force himself on the intoxicated woman. However, he admitted post-encounter that he had asked if she wanted more, which she declined. A departing kiss led to Shamu's conviction. Another woman testified about Shamu's inappropriate behavior during an Uber ride in May 2015, describing his unsettling stares and creepy smiles. Law enforcement swiftly investigated Shamu's background and Uber interactions following the assault. The defense, led by attorney Heather Barbieri, questioned the victim's credibility based on a settled lawsuit, though the non-disclosure agreement clarified no financial gain.
I said this throughout the trial, but if he were a young, white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired fraternity guy, we wouldn't be here.
After careful consideration, State District Judge Gracie Lewis declared Shamu guilty and sentenced him to 25 years in prison. Shamu, expressing disbelief, threatened a hunger strike, but his reaction didn't diminish the severity of his actions.
What makes me most hopeful here is that people can see this and that victims can see this and they feel confident to come forward because we will listen to you, we will believe you.
The defense claimed race influenced the sentencing, a contention disputed by the prosecution. Next, we travel to Hamilton County Court to observe the sentencing of elected Judge Tracy Hunter by Judge Norbert A. Nadell. This concerns the Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas case, where Hunter faced jail time for misconduct, accused of forging documents, misusing a county credit card, and interfering in her brother's termination. Judge Norbert A. Nadell presided over the trial, emphasizing the impact of Hunter's actions on public confidence in the judicial system after she was convicted on one felony charge. A mistrial was declared for the remaining charges, leading to a retrial. The Ohio Supreme Court intervened, issuing a stay on Hunter's sentence, and she sought a new judge. Ultimately, the remaining charges were dropped, and Hunter's jail sentence was postponed pending an appeal.
Judge Hunter has gotten up each morning not knowing whether that was going to be the day that she was going to have to go to jail.
What she wants is to control the fact. What she wants to do is write the law, and what she wants to do is play by her own set of rules right up until today.
Despite numerous appeals, Hunter's conviction stood, and she had to confront the consequences, with her defense attorney maintaining her innocence and expressing apprehension about imprisonment. The prosecutor highlighted Hunter's inclination to control facts, influence laws, and operate by her own rules, emphasizing the seriousness of her actions. The case drew widespread attention and provoked outrage within the African American community, which perceived Hunter as unfairly treated. Attempts to protest her sentence resulted in one person being restrained and held in contempt of court. Following the sentencing, Judge Tracy Hunter was physically removed from the courtroom, alleging injury during the process. In response, she filed a grievance with the county, prompting a sheriff's investigation. The aftermath highlighted the physical resistance encountered while attempting to take Hunter into custody, shedding light on the controversial case. Ultimately, Tracy Hunter was found guilty of abusing her judicial position, leading to a 6-month jail sentence. Subsequently, we moved to the Western Cape High Court, where George Gould Thomas, the 28S gang leader, received a total of 7 life sentences after a 7-year-long trial. Aged 56, Thomas faced an array of charges, including 7 counts of murder, 10 counts of illegal possession of ammunition, 11 counts of illegal possession of firearms, 10 counts of inciting criminal activities, 3 counts each of conspiracy to commit a crime, attempted murder, belonging to a criminal gang, and theft, along with 1 count of housebreaking with the intent to commit robbery. The trial concluded with Thomas and 6 others receiving life imprisonment, while 10 additional individuals were sentenced to terms ranging from 12 to 25 years. The Justice Department underscored its commitment to combating gangsterism and implementing heightened security measures in correctional facilities. Throughout his testimony, Thomas strongly denied being a lethal gang leader.
Today, I'm gonna be brutally honest. I'm not saying I regret it but what I know for a fact, if I could have changed some things, I wouldn't be here where I'm now.
Asserting that he was no longer an active member of the 28S gang. He argued that, while in jail, he lacked the authority to order any murders and claimed not to pose a danger to society. Thomas even mentioned receiving praise for his good behavior in prison. However, the judge deemed his testimony improbable and rejected his claims. Despite his cheerful demeanor during the trial, Thomas laughed even during his sentencing. Judge Chantel Fortuyn found Thomas guilty on multiple charges, including murder, racketeering, belonging to a criminal gang, conspiracy, incitement, attempted murder, housebreaking, theft, and illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. The convictions were related to the murders of Angelo Clayson, Glenston Martin, Usry Abrahams, Haywin Stridham, Cecil Barnes, Gresham Buison, and Nadine Davids. For the 7 counts of murder, Thomas received 7 life sentences and an effective 175 years for the remaining 46 counts. Next, we journey to the Southern District Court, where Michael Cohen faces Judge William Pauley for a series of offenses, including concealing alleged misdeeds of the former president, Mr. Trump.
I am ashamed that I chose to take part in concealing Mr. Trump's illicit acts rather than listening to my own conscience. I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
This legal episode unfolds with Cohen standing trial on charges of financial crimes, perjury, and election interference, all intertwined with President Trump. The courtroom atmosphere brimmed with disbelief as the financial penalties were pronounced. The staggering amounts of $1.39 million in restitution, $500,000 in forfeiture, and $100,000 in fines left both spectators and Cohen himself visibly stunned. The realization of the financial consequences cast a shadow.
Mr. Trump asked you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf.
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably. over the 10 years.
But the true shockwaves came from Cohen's revelations, particularly when questioned about his interactions with Mr. Trump. Outside the courtroom, journalists sought Trump's reaction to Cohen's sentencing met with a guarded expression. Evading inquiries, Trump's silence spoke volumes, nurturing speculation and interpretation.
I'm responsible for your silliness because I did the same thing that you're doing now for 10 years. I protected Mr. Trump for 10 years.
Throughout the trial, Cohen made bold assertions, including statements of this nature. As the proceedings reached their conclusion, Cohen's gaze remained fixed as the sentence was pronounced. Michael Cohen received a 3-year prison sentence for his offenses, coupled with a substantial monetary penalty: $1.39 million in restitution, $500,000 in forfeiture, and $100,000 in fines. We find ourselves at the Columbia County Court, where Judge Jonathan D. Nichols presides over the deeply disturbing case of 60-year-old John Aklan. Accused of sexually assaulting 2 children, Aklan faces the inquiry of a jury. The gravity of his crimes has left the courthouse in shock, with those present struggling to comprehend the extent of his heinous acts. The survivors, who courageously confronted their abuser, grapple with mixed emotions.
I'm really happy that today I'm able to seek justice for what I've been through, because he should never be let out to harm any other children, and I hope that he's sentenced to the rest of his life in prison.
Relieved that justice has been served, but haunted by the trauma they endured. As the prosecutor pronounces the charges, each count lands like a heavy blow to the hearts of those in attendance. The evidence against Aklan is weighty, leaving little room for doubt in the minds of the jury. The survivors, their faces marked by pain, listen attentively, finding solace in their voices being heard and believed. In stark contrast, Aklan displays no visible emotion. His stoic demeanor suggests a detachment from the gravity of his actions, a refusal to acknowledge the irreversible damage he has caused. Despite the defense attorney John Hillman's efforts to plead for leniency, his appeals fall on deaf ears. The judge, acknowledging the enormity of the crimes, refuses to show mercy. In the end, John Aklan is convicted of sexually assaulting 2 children by the Columbia County Court. The sentence is severe, ensuring he will spend the remainder of his life behind bars. During the sentencing, Aklan sits remorselessly, head bowed and staring into space. The judge hands down a staggering sentence of 335 years in state prison. We now find ourselves at the Greene County Courthouse, where Judge F.M. Duggar Jr. presides over the case and trial of 60-year-old Vonda Smith from Afton, Tennessee. Vonda is being sentenced for her involvement in the first-degree murder of a pregnant woman and the second-degree murder of her unborn child. Throughout the trial, witnesses took the stand to vouch for Vonda's character, painting a picture of her as a generally good person. A former co-worker, Jessica Price, expressed her sorrow at the outcome, emphasizing that Vonda would be missed.
Severe lacerations to her skull and fracture in the top of her skull. She trusted being with you as opposed to being with a stranger. And bad things happened. This murder happened after that.
Despite these testimonials, Judge Duggar remained resolute in his conviction, pointing out the heinous nature of the crime and the irreparable loss suffered by the victim's family. Vonda's defense attorney, Gene Scott, pleaded for a more lenient sentence, pointing to her minimal criminal record and long-term employment. However, the judge stood firm in his decision, citing the vulnerability of the victim, both as a pregnant woman and an unborn child.
Not enough justice on this earth where I can bring my daughter back or my grandchild. My biggest consolation is she will never see her grandchild again.
As the proceedings concluded, Tammy Morrison, the grieving mother of Jesse, the victim, gathered the strength to address the court through her tear-streaked face. She conveyed the devastating impact of the loss, acknowledging that no amount of justice could bring back her daughter and grandchild. While Vonda Smith shed tears during the witness testimony, she maintained a blank expression as the judge delivered the sentence. The room fell into a heavy silence as Judge Duggar pronounced the life sentence for first-degree murder, followed by the maximum penalty of 25 years for the second-degree murder charge. Our next destination is the DeKalb County Courthouse in Georgia, where an unsettling case involving a disbarred attorney, Richard Merritt, unfolds. Merritt stands accused of murdering his mother, Shirley Merritt, on the day he was scheduled to surrender for an unrelated conviction, revealing a shocking sequence of events. Facing charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony, Richard Merritt took the stand in his own defense. He painted a disturbing picture of unimaginable violence, claiming to have witnessed two armed men killing his mother in front of him. Merritt professed his love for his mother and emphasized her support during his prior conviction.
Your Honor, I realize that words aren't going to adequately convey what has occurred throughout the past week and the previous several years. I was raised right by two very good people, beautiful people, my mother and father. I had a beautiful family that I've lost. I've long since lost them. I lost them in the Cobb County case.
However, during cross-examination, prosecutors raised doubts about the credibility of his account, highlighting his failure to contact the police during the incident and his subsequent flight from the city. Initially denying any involvement in the murder, Merritt's story faced scrutiny. After a 4-day trial, Richard Merritt was convicted of killing his mother.
The jury find the defendant guilty. As of count 3, felony murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. As of count 4, aggravated assault, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. As of count 5, aggravated assault, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
The verdict provoked a visible emotional reaction from Merritt, who dropped his head and rubbed his eyes in response. The murder occurred on the day Merritt was slated to begin serving a 15-year prison sentence for embezzling money from his clients. During the sentencing hearing, a family member passionately spoke about Merritt's deceitfulness and attempts to evade justice. Merritt's defense attorney, expressing no surprise at the verdict, openly stated his disbelief in Merritt's account. Even Merritt's older brother was unwilling to forgive him for their mother's murder.
And yes, I'm angry because he's hurting people. He hurt the one person who held him up and helped him the most.
In the end, Richard Merritt received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, marking the conclusion of a disturbing and tragic legal saga. Our journey takes us to the Wilson County court trial of Mark Benavidez, a former San Antonio attorney facing severe accusations of trafficking and victimizing multiple women. Benavidez stands accused of exploiting his legal position by engaging in sexual acts with clients in exchange for legal services, revealing a disturbing abuse of power. During the trial, a courageous woman took the stand, testifying that she had been forced by Benavidez, who claimed it was a form of payment for his legal representation. The shocking revelation sent waves through the courtroom, leaving the jury visibly stunned. Prosecuting attorney Meredith Chacon warned the jury that more victims and disturbing videos would unfold throughout the trial. Despite the distressing nature of the evidence, Chacon urged the jury to prioritize exposing the truth and seeking justice.
This says to all of the women who've been affected by Mr. Benavidez that they matter, and I think that is an important message to send.
However, Benavidez's wife pleaded for mercy.
His kids love him so much. Be fair.
And why do you think they should do that?
He doesn't deserve this. He's a good person.
In the trial's initial phase, 6 women shared their harrowing experiences with Benavidez. They revealed that he recorded their encounters at a downtown motel, manipulating them by exploiting their legal troubles. Their testimonies painted a disturbing image of a man who abused his power as an attorney. Following his conviction on 6 counts of continuous trafficking of persons, Benavidez was immediately taken into custody and transported to Wilson County Jail, where he would remain throughout the trial. As the proceedings continued, additional women came forward with similar accounts of being coerced into sexual acts by Benavidez. They recounted being picked up and taken to motels or even the courthouse for his gratification, revealing a consistent pattern of manipulation and power abuse. Throughout the trial, Benavidez remained stoic, revealing little emotion even as his guilt became increasingly undeniable. In the end, he was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole, marking the conclusion of a deeply disturbing and shocking legal saga. At the Brunswick, Georgia courthouse, we witnessed the trial of William Bryan, a key figure in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. At 54, Bryan faces charges of murder, hate crimes, and racism alongside the father and son duo, Gregory McMichael and Travis McMichael. Shockwaves ripple through the courtroom as revelations about Bryan's racial slurs and derogatory comments come to light during the trial. The prosecutor's opening arguments paint a disturbing picture of Bryan's mindset, asserting deep-seated racial bias. The use of racial slurs to describe his daughter's black boyfriend just days before Arbery's murder strengthens the prosecution's claim of a racially motivated crime. As the proceedings unfold, it becomes evident that Bryan's actions are part of a broader pattern of racism. The prosecutor presents evidence of racist language used by all three defendants, including Bryan's own statements to the police immediately after Arbery's death, revealing assumptions about Arbery based solely on instinct.
This quote that we just read, Mr. Bryan is talking about backing up and going at the victim and saying his belief that the victim was trying to get into his truck, right?
The prosecutor's assertion that Arbery would have been safe if he were white echoes through the courtroom, emphasizing the contrast between a peaceful jog and a fight for survival solely due to the color of his skin. The disturbing nature of the defendant's racist remarks becomes undeniable as the prosecution reads messages, social media posts, and texts containing racial slurs, exposing a pattern of dehumanization. The trial lays bare the extent of racial bias and hatred displayed by the defendants.
As far as the remorse, I think Roddy Bryan stands in very different shoes. It is obvious from the beginning that he questioned the tragedy that had occurred at the scene. It was on, I believe, a body cam. I can't remember whose body cam, but the body cam, in fact, questioning whether or not what had occurred, and then took steps early on in this process, I think, that demonstrated that he had grave concerns. So the court, recognizing that Mr. Bryan's position is different. Again, Mr. Bryan was found not guilty on count 1 and count 2. The court sentences Mr. Bryan to life with the possibility of parole on count 3.
Leaving the jury to determine the truth behind Arbery's tragic death. Ultimately, William Bryan, like the other two culprits, the McMichaels, faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. During his sentencing, he sits motionless and emotionless. The court hands down a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years, marking the conclusion of a trial that unveils the disturbing motivations behind Ahmaud Arbery's untimely demise. In El Cajon, justice was served as John David Sanchez, a former Uber driver, faced sentencing for his horrific crimes of sexually assaulting teen girls. Sanchez's actions included the rape of one passenger and the sexual assault of more than a dozen other women, one of whom was only 13 years old. The charges against him were deeply despicable, ranging from rape and sodomy to explicit acts on a child and attempting to prevent a witness from reporting a crime. During the trial, Sanchez's defense attorney argued for simultaneous sentences, emphasizing his remorse. However, both the judge and the prosecutor disagreed, highlighting the severity of Sanchez's crimes and the need for individual accountability. Even the defense, despite their arguments for a certain mode of punishment, acknowledged the heinous nature of his acts.
The conduct in this case is inexcusable.
What he did is absolutely vile and disgusting.
Prosecutors unveiled the shocking details of Sanchez drugging young girls, including the 13-year-old victim, with Xanax, marijuana, and alcohol before assaulting them. The disturbing revelation that he videotaped the assaults further highlighted the gravity of his offenses. Sanchez came to law enforcement's attention thanks to the bravery of a 26-year-old woman who reported a rape during an Uber ride in North Park. Her courage helped identify Sanchez and reveal several other victims. The incident involved Sanchez taking advantage of the woman's vulnerability, leading to the tragic assault.
The gentleman that she was with that night called her an Uber so she could get home safely, and he assaulted her in the backseat of his Uber car.
Sanchez, arrested approximately 1 month after the initial case, was promptly terminated by Uber upon learning of the charges. Investigations into his house uncovered graphic videotapes of assaults on several young girls, some of whom were unaware of the abuse. Deputy District Attorney Carrie Conway emphasized the severity of Sanchez's crimes during the sentencing hearing. She described how he would drug his victims until they passed out, then sexually assault them, leaving many unaware of the offenses until the investigation.
He waited till they passed out, and then he had his way with them. And to compound it, he videotaped it so that he could relive it over and over and over again. I know the court hasn't seen the videos, and it is impossible for me to put into words what is on those videos.
Conway urged the judge to impose the maximum term of 96 years and 4 months behind bars, highlighting the vile and unforgivable nature of Sanchez's actions. She stressed the need to send a strong message to the community that such behavior would not be tolerated. However, even as Judge Evan Curvin sentenced Sanchez to 80 years and 4 months in prison, the perpetrator remained emotionless, displaying no visible reaction.
Reprehensible, were deplorable, were indicative of a sexual predator.
Conway, in her words, asserted that Sanchez had earned every single minute of those 96 years, labeling his deeds as pure evil. The sentencing marked the conclusion of a trial that exposed the horrifying reality of a sexual predator's actions. In the polarizing case involving the shooting and killing of a Black Lives Matter protester, Daniel Perry, an Army sergeant, faced charges in a Texas court for the murder of Garrett Foster during a 2020 protest against police brutality and racial injustice in downtown Austin. The incident unfolded as Perry drove into the group of protesters and shot Foster from his car window. Perry promptly called 911 to report the incident. During the trial, the jury was presented with body camera footage capturing the aftermath, where Perry was described as visibly shaken due to his involvement in the traumatic event. Perry explained that protesters attacked his car, leading him unintentionally to turn into the crowd. However, unsealed court records exposed Perry's troubling social media activity and communication leading up to the murder.
There looked to be like boot or kick marks along the vehicle, and then I observed what I felt was, at the time, 2 bullet holes in the vehicle.
Online searches related to the protests, engagement with racist content, and messages discussing the purchase of additional ammunition and the readiness to harm or kill individuals were revealed. Perry's messages, expressing his willingness to shoot looters and discussing the stand your ground defense, were particularly damning, occurring just 2 weeks before the shooting. Perry's defense argued self-defense, claiming Foster approached his car with an AK-47 rifle. Witnesses denied this account, stating Foster never raised his weapon. Perry, stationed at Fort Hood and working for Uber in Austin, was captured on a live Facebook stream during the chaos among protesters. Prosecutors sought a minimum of 25 years, while Perry's defense sought a 10-year sentence. The sentencing hearing became contentious, with arguments focusing on Perry's racist social media posts and text messages, as well as his psychological condition. Perry's defense downplayed the significance of his posts.
These conversations with Michael Holcomb are starting to look like a playbook for what you would do if you wanted to use force in these situations.
While the prosecution portrayed him as a potential danger due to mental health issues and military training. In May 2023, a Texas judge sentenced Perry to 25 years in prison.
Legitimate self-defense. Daniel Perry had 0.2 of a second to decide what he had to do.
Close your eyes and picture that.
And as you're picturing that, picture this.
Perry, visibly affected, was seen crying and being comforted.
This court sentences you to a term of 25 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott's tweet expressing intent to pardon Perry after his sentencing stirred controversy, with conservatives criticizing the conviction. Despite the noise, Foster's family was satisfied with the court's decision.
After 3 long years, we're finally getting justice for Garrett.
In the murder trial presided over by Circuit Judge Matthew Stewart in the Shiawassee County Circuit Court, 50-year-old Mark Latunsky, a Michigan resident, faced charges for the gruesome killing of Kevin Bacon. Latunsky pleaded guilty to the murder and mutilation of Bacon's corpse. The chilling details of Bacon's murder cast a somber atmosphere over the courtroom. The discovery of Bacon's remains days after his disappearance shocked everyone present. Latunsky's violent acts left the courtroom in horrified disbelief, struggling with the depth of immorality. During the impact statements, the grief of Bacon's family, particularly his sister Jenny Bacon, flooded the room.
You as parents are the first to go be with Jesus, but because of someone who decided to take our son's life, that isn't the case for us. Only 25 years old and had a great career as a hairstylist and hadn't been able to graduate from U of M in psychology, even though they were kind enough to honor him his degree. Such a short life for our son who had a lot to do in this world still.
Jenny delivered a heartbreaking statement.
December 24, 2019, it was the last time I saw my brother Kevin alive. I had to wait 3 long days to learn of Kevin's murder, unaware to me that he was killed on Christmas Eve night. Kevin meant the world to me, and I will never have another brother like him. The day I learned of Kevin's death, a part of me died with him because he was my first best friend, brother, and protector. Kevin was my protector from cruel people who didn't understand me like he did, because of a disability that I was born with.
Adding an emotional layer to the already gloomy proceedings. Even as his defense attorney spoke, Latunsky stood remorsefully still during the sentencing. The judge's ruling highlighted the calculated nature of the crime, emphasizing that Bacon's death was Latunsky's intentional plan. In light of this, the judge sentenced Mark Latunsky to life in prison without the possibility of parole, marking the end of a trial that exposed the darkness of a heinous crime and the profound impact on the victim's family. In the case of Richard Kenzo at Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham, Massachusetts, the Massachusetts lawyer faced charges related to his involvement with victims of sexual abuse, specifically possession and distribution of explicit child photography. Kenzo, with ties to Brookline and Stoughton, was prosecuted and later convicted for these heinous crimes. Judge Douglas Wilkins presided over the case and, following Kenzo's conviction, ordered his sentence for possessing and distributing explicit child photography. Despite pleas from Kenzo's attorney for no jail time, citing his lack of a criminal record and poor health, the Norfolk County prosecutor sought a 3 to 5 year prison term. A forensic search of Kenzo's computer uncovered disturbing search terms and images. Despite Kenzo's claim during the trial that he was allowed to possess such images due to a legal exemption, Judge Wilkins rejected this argument and found him guilty of both possession and distribution charges. The distribution charge carried a 10-year minimum sentence if a prison term was imposed, with probation as a possible alternative. Upon the conclusion of the trial, Kenzo was taken into custody and required to register as a sex offender. Despite wearing a mask that concealed his emotions, he showed little visible reaction upon leaving the courtroom after his conviction. In the end, Richard Kenzo was sentenced to 2.5 years in the House of Corrections, marking the legal consequences of his disturbing actions. In the Multnomah County Circuit Court in Portland, Oregon, lawyer Lori Devon faced trial and was subsequently sentenced for defrauding 36 victims over a span of 18 years. Lori Devon expressed remorse during the sentencing, stating that she never intended to harm her clients and regretted causing them additional pain. However, she acknowledged deviating from her purpose of helping them, resulting in them paying the price for her actions.
To all the victims who came to me in physical or emotional pain, who shared their stories and their lives with me, I can only tell you how sorry I am that instead of helping you, I inflicted more pain.
Circuit Judge Jerry B. Hodson stressed the severity of Devon's crimes and the breach of trust involved. He emphasized the substantial number of victims she defrauded, the extent of the losses incurred, and the calculated and consistent manner in which she preyed upon, intimidated, and stripped her victims of their compensation, financial stability, health, security, and hope. The judge's decision came after hearing testimonies from 25 of Devon's victims who described in painful detail how they sought her assistance for their medical cost settlements, but were subjected to further harm instead. Devon, disbarred and recognized by the state bar as having perpetrated the worst fraud among all attorneys in its history, received a concurrent sentence of nearly 8.5 years in federal prison. Prosecutors had sought a 20-year prison term for Devon, who admitted to stealing $1.8 million from 36 clients. However, the total number of victims was estimated at around 135, collectively losing $4.6 million to her fraudulent scheme. Victims recounted how Devon gained their trust through gestures like hospital visits, flowers, and holiday cards, only to deceive them when it came time to collect their settlement checks.
Alaboshi, KGW Channel 8. Do you care to apologize to your victims?
I've already done that in court today. I have nothing further to say to you.
Do you care to apologize to the legal community here?
She strung them along with various excuses while forging their signatures, diverting their funds into personal accounts. The extent of her deception was evident when she forced an injured teenager into opening a separate bank account and then forged the girl's signature to deposit a settlement check into her own account. During the sentencing, Devon's reaction remained unspecified, leaving her emotions and demeanor in the courtroom undecided. However, when leaving the courtroom, she was sentenced to 14 years in prison, paying the price for defrauding her 36 clients. In Vista, former basketball star Jeremy George Vague, who worked as a driver for Lyft and Uber, was sentenced to a year in jail for assaulting 2 women. Vague, 37, pleaded guilty to felony false imprisonment by force and misdemeanor, counts of indecent exposure, and sexual battery. The first assault occurred on September 4, 2016, when Vague sexually assaulted a 24-year-old intoxicated woman while working for Uber. The second assault took place on September 16, 2016, when he sexually assaulted an 18-year-old woman he picked up at Palomar College while working for Uber. Vague's sentencing followed allegations from more victims who came forward after his arrest, including 2 19-year-old women in Escondido. The prosecution argued that Vague exploited his imposing stature and his position as an Uber and Lyft driver to intimidate passengers. Despite Vague's expressions of remorse and his defense attorney emphasizing his client's shame and emotional state, the prosecution portrayed him as a sexual predator and opportunist. The judge acknowledged the seriousness of the case, labeling Vague a sexual predator and opportunist, but decided on a jail sentence rather than prison. Considering Vague's early guilty plea, limited criminal record, and expressions of remorse, he received a 1-year jail sentence, 3 years of probation, and was ordered to register as a sex offender. The judge aimed to closely monitor Vague's future activities through the imposition of a public registration requirement. Vague's defense attorney acknowledged his client's remorse and shame, highlighting his emotional state during the proceedings.
He wrote an apology letter to the victim. He said, "I'm sorry." He didn't drag this out through the court process.
The judge emphasized that Vague had exploited young girls and viewed the case as an opportunity for strict supervision under felony probation. Law enforcement officials encouraged any additional victims to come forward, stressing the importance of serving justice.
His insistence that he was going to have sexual contact with her one way or another, which he did by bribing her to take off her shirt.
Deputy District Attorney Sean Leslie noted Vague's visible remorse during the hearing, stating, "He's crying as we speak. He is so ashamed of what he has done, underscoring the impact of Vague's actions on his victims.
When you have somebody who's demonstrated a pattern of sexual aggression on young...
In Brunswick, Georgia, at the courthouse, the trial of 68-year-old Gregory McMichael is ongoing for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Alongside his son Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael has been found guilty in the pursuit and killing of Ahmaud Arbery. He faced multiple charges, including felony murder and hate crimes.
It's interesting to note that the most violent crime in Satilla Shores was the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. So, sentencing does not generally provide closure. I think Ms. Wanda Cooper-Jones also talked about closure, but I don't find that it really does, and I think that's an unfortunate thing. Because in this case, I think many people are seeking closure. The mother, the father, the community.
As the guilty verdict was read, Gregory McMichael appeared stunned, and his expression shifted from disbelief to a mix of disappointment and sadness. It was evident that he had expected a different outcome, believing that he and his son were justified in their actions. Despite the guilty verdict, McMichael's lawyers expressed their disappointment and vowed to appeal the decision.
Greg McMichael, the court sentences you as follows. Count 1, malice murder, defendant was found not guilty. Count 2, felony murder, life without the possibility of parole.
They emphasized that McMichael genuinely believed he was doing the right thing, suggesting that he still clung to the idea that their pursuit of Arbery was justified. During the sentencing, Gregory McMichael sat unconcerned and unbothered, his face devoid of any emotion. Despite the guilty verdict, McMichael's lawyers maintained their commitment to the legal process, respecting the jury's decision while exploring options for a new trial for Gregory McMichael. The guilty verdict marked a significant turning point in his life, as he now faced the prospect of spending the rest of his days behind bars, serving a life imprisonment. In the Colleton County Courthouse, the notorious Alex Murda faced consecutive life sentences for the murders of his wife, Margaret, and son, Paul. The former attorney was charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of using a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence linking Alex Murda to the fatal shootings of his wife and son. The prosecution emphasized the shattered image of the esteemed legal family and Murda's denial of guilt. The unsolved slayings triggered a series of events, including allegations of Murda hiring a hitman for insurance money and various financial crime charges against him.
But it is overwhelming, and it shows this man to be a cunning manipulator, a man who placed himself above all others, including his family. A man who violated the trust of so many, including his friends, his family, his partners, his profession, but most of all, Maggie and Paul.
Throughout the proceedings, Murda maintained his innocence. In July 2022, the grand jury indicted Murda on double murder charges, marking a turning point in the perplexing case.
I'm innocent. I would never hurt my wife, Maggie, and I would never hurt my son, Paul.
The jury reached a verdict after over 6 weeks of trial. Alex Murda was found guilty of murdering his wife and son, providing some closure to the community haunted by the tragic events. As the verdict was read out, Alex Murda displayed a range of emotions. His face contorted with mild shock and disbelief. A mix of remorse and regret was evident in a somewhat tearful gaze.
Sent you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murda. I sentence you for a term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murda, whom you probably loved so much.
The guilty party was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms for the murders of Maggie Murda and Paul Murda. In a German criminal court in Frankfurt, Armin Maiwis faced charges for the murder and cannibalism of Baron Jürgen Brandes. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the judge delivered the verdict, sentencing Maywes to life in prison, overturning his previous 8-year sentence. The case had pushed Germany's legal system to its limits, dealing with the complex question of the boundaries of murder. Maywes' defense team argued for a more lenient sentence, invoking the concept of killing upon request, which carried a maximum penalty of 5 years. The crux of their argument was Brandis' consent to his own killing and consumption. The chilling details that emerged during the trial revealed that Brandis had willingly responded to Maywes' online post seeking a victim. The gruesome rendezvous occurred at Maywes' home, where he severed Brandis' penis and shared it as their final meal. The courtroom was filled with shock and disgust as these disturbing accounts were recounted. The graphic nature of the evidence, including excerpts from the videotape documenting the chilling event, left many visibly shaken. The magnitude of Maywes' actions left a profound sense of horror and disbelief lingering in the room. Psychiatrists testified during the trial, asserting that despite Maywes' deep-rooted fascination with cannibalism since his youth, he was psychologically sound. This revelation added an eerie layer to the proceedings, as those in attendance struggled to comprehend the mind of a man capable of such unspeakable acts. In contrast, the prosecutors argued that Maywes should have been aware of Brandis' disturbed state and questioned his motives for wanting to be killed more thoroughly. As the gavel fell, Maywes, who remained calm throughout the entire process, received his sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom's atmosphere undoubtedly bore the weight of a case that challenged the very limits of the legal system and human understanding. In a Florida courtroom, Nicholas Steffens, a South Florida attorney, faced charges of embezzlement from foreclosure transactions that affected at least 49 victims. Steffens was sentenced to prison for embezzling over $500,000. During the sentencing hearing, Steffens expressed remorse, citing personal struggles with depression after his divorce as a contributing factor to his actions.
An order signed by the court, get a check, and pocket it. And the claims are in excess of $1 million. There were at least 49 or 50 victims.
He admitted to acting alone out of greed and leading a false lifestyle. Steffens thanked the court for allowing him to spend Father's Day with his daughter before his imprisonment. His defense attorney acknowledged Steffens' acceptance of responsibility and mentioned that he was paying the price for his actions. The prosecutor, Assistant State Attorney David Schulson, revealed that there were at least 49 or 50 victims affected by Steffens' crimes, with claims amounting to over $1 million. Despite some victims believing the sentence was fair, the Florida bar took further action by revoking Steffens' license to practice law. Steffens appeared remorseful during the sentencing hearing, expressing regret for his actions and acknowledging the impact on his victims. The defense attorney mentioned that he doesn't know where the embezzled money went. Ultimately, Nicholas Steffens was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The case highlighted the consequences of financial crimes and the legal system's commitment to holding individuals accountable for their actions. The case of Jason Dalton in Kalamazoo, Michigan, unfolded tragically as the Uber driver pleaded guilty to a shooting spree in 2016. Dalton faced 16 charges, including 6 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of using a firearm during the commission of a felony. On February 20th, 2016, Dalton embarked on a shooting spree while driving for Uber, killing 6 people and injuring 2 others. Shockingly, he picked up passengers between the attacks, showcasing a chilling calmness amidst the violence. Dalton later claimed to detectives that he believed the Uber app had turned him into a puppet, selecting his targets for him.
I have a hard time believing this, but it literally took over mind and body.
The Uber app?
Yes. It was red when I first started. Okay. I switched from red to black. Okay. When it's in that black mode, it literally has control of you.
The victims included Tiana Carruthers, who valiantly shielded children but survived with severe injuries, and others like Barbara Hawthorne, Mary Jo Nye, Abigail Kopf, Tyler Smith, Mary Lou Nye, Dorothy Brown, and Richard Smith. Dalton targeted Richard Smith and his 17-year-old son, Tyler Smith, at a local dealership, and the rampage concluded at a Cracker Barrel restaurant. Concerns arose about Uber's responsibility for passenger safety, leading to a lawsuit by Matt Mellon, who had a harrowing encounter with Dalton before the shootings. The lawsuit aimed to hold Uber and Dalton accountable for their actions. Before the trial could fully commence, Dalton pleaded guilty during jury selection.
I seen him coming, and I saw a gun.
Despite his defense attorney's advice against an insanity defense, Dalton chose to submit a guilty plea to spare both his family and the victims' families from the emotional turmoil of a trial. During the trial, Dalton listened to impact statements from the victims' families, but showed no remorse.
No, they gave bags. These old people, they have these old black bags. They're called they're black. They're black bags that people drive around and you look at.
As Tiana Carruthers tried to speak, Dalton rambled on, causing her to burst into tears.
So, Ms. Carruthers, are you okay? Or do we need to take a minute?
Eventually, he was dragged out of the court and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Judge Christopher Heineck presided over the proceedings, ensuring justice for the lives lost, and the survivors left to cope with the aftermath. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.